The horizon bleeds crimson under the weight of 1,000 galloping hooves. For centuries, the Mongol Empire has been etched into our collective memory as a monolithic force of pure destruction, a tidal wave of scorched earth, severed heads, and burning libraries. We see the scourge of God, a faceless swarm that erased civilizations as easily as a gale scatters autumn leaves. Look closer at the embers. Beneath the veneer of the barbarian conqueror, there lay the blueprints of a global architect. How does a nomadic society, lacking cities, bureaucracy, or a written language, suddenly forge the largest contiguous land empire in human history, connecting the frozen reaches of Siberia to the humid jungles of Vietnam? Before we venture deeper into this paradox, a necessary note: the information in this video is based on current historical research. Interpretations may vary among historians, and while we examine the structural ingenuity of the Mongol state, this analysis does not serve to excuse the staggering loss of life or the harrowing atrocities that defined their expansion. Consider the Pax Mongolica, a period of relative stability that allowed silk, spices, gunpowder, and philosophy to flow along the Silk Road with unprecedented ease. They were architects of connectivity in an age of isolation. They did not just break the world, they rewired it. Can a regime built on the foundation of total war ever truly be considered a benefactor of human progress? Or was their genius merely a tool to sustain their dominion? The transition from the chaos of the conquest to the order of the empire was not a shift in character, but a calculated evolution of power. The empire is waiting to be understood. The map of the 13th century was a jagged mosaic of dying embers. Tolls were exorbitant, bandits were emboldened by the vacuum of authority, and the great cultural exchange of the ancient world had slowed to a claustrophobic crawl. Then came the thunder of hooves. In a staggering blink of historical time, the Mongol state erupted from the windswept steppes, relentless kinetic force that dismantled the old guard with terrifying efficiency. They tore down the bureaucratic walls that had stifled movement for centuries, transforming the fractured landscape into a vast, unified theater of operations. This was not the expansion of a mere raiding party. As Genghis's successors pushed the borders of the Yasa, the Great Law, deep into the heart of Persia and the plains of Eastern Europe, they did something counterintuitive to the logic of the era. Imagine a merchant standing at the edge of the Gobi. Under the Pax Mongolica, that same merchant found the path smoothed by the iron discipline of the Yam, a sophisticated, high-speed relay system that stretched across thousands of miles. They understood that an empire's strength was not measured by the depth of its dungeons, but by the velocity of its trade. The chaos of the conquest was merely the clearing of the brush. The fractured Silk Road was no longer a collection of contested territories. It was a highway of ideas, technologies, and faiths. The transition was violent, yes, an upheaval that shook the foundations of every throne from Beijing to Baghdad. The horsemen had broken the old world, but in the ruins, they were stitching together the blueprint of the modern age. The world was no longer a collection of fragments, it was a singular, breathing beast, and the Mongols held the reins. The horizon hummed with the rhythmic thunder of hooves, not of war, but of messengers. Across the vast, jagged spine of the Eurasian steppe, the Mongols forged the Yam, a nervous system of iron-willed efficiency. Every 30 miles, a station stood ready, stocked with fresh mounts and sustenance, ensuring that a decree issued in the heart of Karakorum could reach the distant borders of Europe with the speed of a breaking storm. Beneath the watchful gaze of the Great Khan, the Silk Road ceased to be a gauntlet of bandits and fractured tolls. It became a protected thoroughfare. Merchants who once trembled at the prospect of mountain passes now moved with the security of the state behind them. Gold, silk, spices, and more importantly, revolutionary technologies flowed in an uninterrupted stream. But the most radical architecture of the empire was not made of stone or road. It was the architecture of the mind. In an era defined by inquisitions and holy wars, the Mongols enforced a policy of jarring, absolute tolerance. Within their borders, a Nestorian Christian could debate a Buddhist monk, while a Muslim scholar drafted maps for a Taoist mystic. The great Khans did not care for the flavor of one's prayers, only for the loyalty of the subject. By stripping away the barriers of dogma, they transformed the empire into a massive, open-air laboratory. Ideas were no longer trapped in the silos of isolated kingdoms. They were cross-pollinated, refined, and set loose. The Mongols acted as the grand librarians of humanity, gathering the world's disparate threads and weaving them into a single, vibrant tapestry. The empire was not merely a conquest of land, it was a conquest of isolation itself. The silence of the Silk Road was shattered not just by the thunder of hooves, but by the rhythmic pulse of a world suddenly synchronized. Under the Pax Mongolica, the vast, fractured map of Eurasia began to bleed into one. This was the original global nervous system, a high-speed conduit for innovation that turned the planet into a singular, breathing laboratory. In the imperial courts, the Mongols practiced a radical, pragmatic meritocracy. Astronomers from Samarkand collaborated with cartographers from the Mediterranean, mapping the heavens and the earth with a precision previously deemed impossible. Medical knowledge, once sequestered behind the walls of isolated kingdoms, surged across borders like a rising tide. They standardized weights, measures, and the very concept of the postal relay, a precursor to the digital networks that bind us today. This was the first time in history that a human being could travel from the Pacific coast to the gates of Europe under a single, overarching security, carrying ideas as precious as gold. They dismantled the fortresses of human isolation, forcing the world to acknowledge its own interdependence. When we look at our own era, a time of instant communication and seamless global trade, we are merely inhabiting the logical conclusion of the path they carved. They forced the world to speak, to trade, and to evolve. We are the heirs to this great compression. The walls that once divided us have been replaced by the invisible cables of our interconnected age, yet the fundamental challenge remains the same. How do we use this closeness to build, rather than to destroy? History does not move in circles, it moves in echoes. Join us as we continue to unmask the hidden architects of our modern world.